Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis and I am surviving an avoidant discard. So today I wanted to share with you a video that I came across on YouTube that was completely unrelated to relationships or attachment theory or anything to do with a dismissive avoidant. But it definitely made me think of every single relationship that I have ever been in my entire life, including the most recent one with Sarah, in a way that I'd never thought of before. And the video was titled something to the effect of "Why are ancient ruins always buried?" or "Why are old cities always buried underneath other cities?" And it was this idea that, these days, if a building were to burn down or collapse or whatever, we would clear away the rubble. We would take the soil back to undisturbed soil before we built something new on that site. But in ancient times, if a building were to collapse, quite often they would just kind of help it finish collapsing and then fill the site in with dirt and more rubble, and then just build the next building right on top of the ruins of the old one. And then, of course, they would have to bring the level of the street or the surrounding land up, by filling in more dirt. And then this process would happen multiple times over. And there's a church somewhere in Europe. I want to say it was in Italy. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember the video. Where they've excavated underneath this church, and there's something like 5 or 6 different layers of ruins of previous buildings, houses, different types of buildings that this church was built on over the centuries. And that got me thinking that was kind of like how every relationship I've ever been in was. If I go way back, when I was younger, if a relationship ended, there was not a lot of introspection or self-awareness. I mean, YouTube wasn't around then, didn't know about attachment theory. You would often just chalk it up to, well, that didn't work out, and you would go back to distractions, and you would basically fill in the rubble or put in more dirt of that ruined relationship with distractions, and build the next relationship right on top of that somewhat shaky foundation of the one before. And that process again would go on and on and on. And I might have mentioned it on the channel before. If I did, forgive me for repeating myself, but I really believe that men in particular, we don't really truly mature until we reach the age of 40. So all of those relationships prior to 40 were all, relatively short term, no depth. Like I said, when they ended, there was no self-awareness, no introspection of what went wrong, trying to correct it. It was just relationship after relationship built on the shaky foundation and the shaky ruins of the previous relationship. Since 40, there's been 3 relationships that I would call my first, conscious or self-aware, mature relationships, enough to notice a pattern of what was happening, where when that relationship ended, the rubble wasn't quite cleared away, but at least there was a little bit of looking at, okay, what happened here? And that takes us up to, the most recent relationship breakup with Sarah, where, if we envision that same analogy of the church, we've got this relationship with her built on the foundation of all of these other collapsed buildings. And when the plaster in that house started to, crack, and things started to go wrong in the relationship, as the anxious, leaning, fearful avoidant, I'm like panicking, like, oh my God, let's, we can renovate this, we can fix it, we can, we can make it look beautiful like it was when we moved in here. And on her side of things with the avoidant, she already had one foot out the door most of the time. So as soon as it started to crumble, she's planning where else she's going to go, and she's out of here. And what neither one of us really realized at the time was that building was collapsing, but it wasn't the building itself that was collapsing. Yes, there were things in that relationship that were unique to that relationship that were, problems. But unbeknownst to us, running underneath all of these buildings, all of her collapsed relationships and my collapsed relationships, was an abandoned mine that neither one of us really knew was there. And that was what was collapsing. And it was taking all of the structures above it with it. And that abandoned mine basically represented, hers and my attachment wounds, the fear of abandonment, the fear of betrayal that had been there through our whole lives, that no one had really addressed. And that's really what was taking the relationship with it, or taking the relationship down. So I know a lot of you have probably had this experience. Feel free to share in the comments that, when you went through this avoidant discard, my experience was, I was absolutely devastated. I mean, this was such an important part of my life that just, gone. Um, and it literally felt like there was like a giant hole in my chest that was just gone. Like there was just a huge piece of me that was just gone. And the fact is, yes, that's somewhat true. That person left, and the unique qualities that belong to Sarah and no one else are obviously gone. But it wasn't so much that she took a big chunk out of me, it's that she exposed, just like the mine shaft, a much larger wound underneath that hadn't been healed yet. Um, so, I know a lot of people tend to villainize avoidance and call them narcissists and whatnot, but they're building that relationship with you. They've got their own collapsed mind. They're just as unhealthy as we are. Um, so sometimes when we go through these experiences, you can sit there and say, or wish, oh, if I could just go back and I would build this differently on that relationship, and or do that differently. But it wouldn't have mattered. Again, you didn't know the mine shaft was there, and that mine shaft was going to collapse no matter what you built on top of it. It was still going to collapse. So that kind of wishful thinking, it's not helpful. Like I wouldn't go back now and undo the last 2.5 years, because I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have made the connections with different people that I've made and learned so much about myself. Like there's no way that I would undo that. It's, if you're a Garth Brooks fan, there's a song called "The Dance." Like, I could have missed the pain, but I would have had to miss the dance. So, I get it if you're kind of stuck in that rumination and magical thinking and wishful thinking, and maybe it's just a phase or a stage that you have to go through to kind of work yourself out of it. But I urge you to try to not stay in that stage too long, and as quick as you can get some perspective. Like that video gave me a bird's eye perspective of, oh, that's why this thing collapsed. It's not the relationship so much that collapsed. It's all of the other stuff that's been there basically my entire life, and that now I'm grateful is exposed and I'm able to work on it. So as always, I wish everyone the best. I hope you're taking care of yourself, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.